Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto video. This is going to be my speculation ahead of Boruto manga chapter 79, which is coming out in a week. I believe it is going to be the 20th of March when we get this chapter. And the first thing to note about this chapter is, one, significantly, it is going to be a volume ending chapter. It'll be the fourth chapter in the volume that it gets collected in, meaning this will have a full-on volume cliffhanger, not just a chapter cliffhanger. Usually these chapters are more significant than others, and given that we're already throughout all of this kind of volume, the last couple of chapters, we're in the middle of some very important events happening, you would expect that this will also be just as significant. But we know that there's a lot going on. So this will also have to be some sort of setup for the next volume. Now this gets into sort of speculation about how long do we think we have left before we get to the time skip. In my mind, I think, we're not going to get it done in just the next chapter unless we do some crazy stuff. So I'm thinking at the very least we have 5 chapters left. So this upcoming one, 79, and then the 4 chapters, the volume following this, will be the big one, I think, to really clearly get us to the time skip, or at the very least, by the end of these 5 chapters, we will know roughly when we're going to end the volume, and we'll have a better sense for what we're doing. Because there are a lot of moving parts going on here that we don't fully know, even though we have a strong sense of some story direction. There's still a lot of parts that we don't know about. So, let's get into some keynotes from the chapter that we already have here. So chapter 78. In the grand scheme of things, there's not actually that much. I only have these 4 notes. So 1, Sarada was nearly killed by Kawaki. And obviously, if you're a fan of her character, it was not a very strong presentation of the character in that scene. She didn't activate the Sharingan or even attempt to defend herself. The idea was just that she stood there, was a little bit surprised with what's going on, tried to talk. Kawaki moves to attack, and she does not seem to be able to defend herself. Now, is that because of the potential friendship, because they're on the same team together, and she's just surprised by that, and she hasn't, gotten herself into the mindset to, attack or defend herself against Kawaki? Or is it meant to demonstrate how powerful Kawaki actually is, that Sarada isn't just nowhere a match? Because that is the case ultimately. She's not strong enough, but there was no even attempt to defend herself. So will this light a spark in her for her to get stronger? At the very least, she should now know how to treat Kawaki, and things probably won't go exactly the same way that they went previously. But still, it doesn't really seem that she has the tools to defeat Kawaki necessarily. So that is quite interesting. Because we want Sarada to ultimately have some sort of a character arc, but it feels like, except for the Sharingan upgrades, basically, it's hard to really pinpoint what exactly we're trying to do necessarily, because she's just not in the focus much at all. Then, we did see Boruto get the Ice Guard. This was probably the most significant in terms of notable event that we saw happen here. And it's just sort of a, cool, okay, we finally have this moment highlighting that we are right there. Boruto is beginning to kind of become the character that we see in the chapter 1 flash forward scene, and him getting the Ice Guard was a very, very important kind of thing to happen. Then we have this, a little bit more of a subtle point from the chapter, but notable. Amado is informed about what's happening with Kawaki, and that the village may now have to move to sort of take out or kill Kawaki. And Amado is sort of concerned about that, because we know he sort of cares about Kawaki to a certain degree, but he also has his own motivations, as we know, and we'll get into that in a second. So how is Amado going to react if the village does put out the order of everyone go after Kawaki, kill him if you have to, he's become too much of a threat? How do we do that? What do we do with that? That's interesting. Then we have, of course, Momoshiki takes control of Boruto again, but this time he helps Kawaki to escape for some unknown reason that seems to be Momoshiki setting up the future that he knows will come to pass. The whole your blue eyes, those blue eyes will take everything from you situation. And what's going on here? Because as far as we're aware, he doesn't particularly like the idea of, because he still cares about, I think, the Otsutsuki kind of imperative. So if Kawaki's going to try and kill other Otsutsuki, why is he doing this? Does he care so much about getting one over on Boruto that he's going to make this happen? Or is this some sort of a plot where he realizes this will somehow create some sort of an opening for him to gain full control or be free from Boruto and live again? Because I think that's the big thing. Momoshiki is one of the most interesting characters in the Boruto manga. And so it feels like, is there something bigger going on here that we don't quite know about? But let's get into speculation. So the big thing here also is that we seem to be moving towards the Chapter 75 future vision scene, which suggests that the village will go to pursue Kawaki with the likes of Shikadai and his team. Sarada's going to be there. Mitsuki, of course, we know, are going to eventually catch up with him and apparently call him out for, like, this is not what friends do, or whatever. Mitsuki goes into sage mode, noting how annoyed he is, and we already have seen sort of in a way the setup for this. Mitsuki's pretty furious at Kawaki for what he's done here. So this looks to be a pretty huge moment of, like, basically an exhausted Kawaki going up against Mitsuki in sage mode. Should make for a somewhat even fight, you'd assume, potentially. But who knows what way that's actually going to work. You'd almost be a little bit afraid for Mitsuki, because even in the manga especially, like, he really doesn't get much character focus. Even the whole him being kind of obsessed with Boruto doesn't get brought up as much as you'd actually think. So I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see what's happening here, but for sure it seems like this is what we are building towards, the Chapter 75 scene, because that's the way it kind of ends up kind of working out, is that, so we have what Chapter 79 is going to be a volume ender. That means 78, 77 and 76. So yeah, the 75 stuff was like the cliffhanger ending for, like, the previous volume, and now we spent an entire volume effectively building up to get to that scene. So it makes sense that I think that's what we're building towards. So how things are going to go obviously depend on the actions of other characters as well. And this is where I'll bring up the Amado, Ada, and Daemon stuff. And I think I've been talking about this in my reviews and some of my speculations recently quite a lot. They are all working with the Leaf Village. They're technically allied with the Leaf Village at this point. But these are deals that can be broken whenever, because we know that these are characters who have motivations beyond just an absolute loyalty to the Leaf Village. The issue is that they all need Kawaki for some reason or another. Amado needs him to have any chance of reviving his daughter, Akebi. And Ada, of course, wants a real relationship with Kawaki. Daemon, of course, seems to just follow Ada, unless they do some character stuff that will suggest that he becomes more of his own character. But for the most part, these three characters are very tied to Kawaki, and likely are not going to agree with the idea that he should be killed. So if they make that harsh decision, that will force these characters to move into action to save Kawaki in some way. And the big question is going to be, will all three sort of, like, leave the village to go with Kawaki, given that Kawaki's sort of on the run now? And what will that then do? Because Amado, of course, is interesting because he's such a knowledgeable character about so much of what seems to be going on, but then he is driven by the want to get his daughter back, and that is going to come up again. You can't just forget about that. That was, like, set up in somewhat still recent chapters. So we're going to have to address that, and I think Kawaki could use someone like Amado being on his side. But otherwise, it does feel like the presentation of Amado is that he otherwise was allied with the Leaf Village against Otsutsuki, but Kawaki is the one who's actually more directed towards actually, going against Otsutsuki. So, you could see the idea of him really focusing on maybe being allied with Kawaki. It'll just be interesting to see overall how that goes. Then we have Ada. Now, it's interesting that she's just sort of got here, and so is she immediately going to want to leave? And especially with some of the other setup stuff they're doing with Ada, where like she's now friends with Sumire and Sarada. What does that do to this situation? Does that mean she has a slightly better connection with the village or not? And the whole, those two are some of the only characters capable of technically, in a scenario, taking out Ada if required. Are we going to build up to that happening in some way? The other point, and I think this is a very interesting one, I think I forgot to note this down anywhere, is the mystery surrounding Ada's charming power. Remember, Momoshiki was not able to classify it a bunch of chapters ago, but then I think it was maybe the following chapter, he's like, oh, I've actually figured out what it is. So it suggests that, you know, okay, that power is actually something he's familiar with. It's just maybe being used in an unusual way by Ada. So how's that going to end up playing out? Because the one thing I can think of is like, what if that power at its core is actually some sort of a mind control power? That's been my speculation for a while, that it sort of is this unconscious kind of leaking out of the power from her that causes people to be attracted to her and not hurt her. But what if she ever chooses to control that side of her power? It would seem like more heavily directed. She could just potentially take over the minds of people and kind of control them more directly that way. And this might create a situation where, like, this is how you turn the tables here. Ada at any time could theoretically be able to take control almost of the entire Leaf Village, apart from like a select few characters. And that might be a key thing in terms of allowing Kawaki to escape, is just that Ada gets in the way of so many characters. That's one thing to do. And that would prompt maybe some sort of a situation where the few characters who are immune are going to be so key to potentially stopping her as well. But then you also have Daemon to protect Ada, but then they're almost setting up the idea that, like, is Himawari the weakness of Daemon in some way? Now, what exactly they're going to do with that, we're not really sure. But it creates a lot of interesting dynamics that could bring other characters into play. So Ada making her decision could alter the opinions of a lot of other characters, because she's so much in control of things ultimately. But then there's this point. If Ada leaves the village, Code says he will attack. He basically is saying that I won't attack while she's there to give them the early warning signal. So if she chooses to leave with Kawaki, that will immediately prompt the attack on the village. And with everyone looking out for Kawaki, the village is going to get obliterated by Code. But is he going to be like, wait, none of the key players are here. Do I just destroy the village anyway? Or, you know, do I wait and go after the specific people I came here to go after? And then, will the Code stuff, like, even happen now? It's so unclear about, like, they could choose to kind of really stop things right now, come back post-time skip and Code still be a thing, or they could also deal with him right now. With Kawaki, we know that he's low in energy. They've already said that because he's used the shrinking power quite a bit. So they're kind of, I think, getting across the idea that he's still a threat to a lot of characters, but it's not the same as, like, Ishiki just going all out type thing. That it seems to be the idea. If he lets a bunch of skilled shinobi catch up to him, he is at risk. And that's the thing. Where do things go from here? Where does he go? Is this where we maybe get him potentially killing certain characters before he eventually gets away? His goal overall is to kill all Otsutsuki. But we know he doesn't kill Boruto here. Otherwise, the flash forward scene in chapter 1 can't actually happen. So weakened, we assume he can't stand against Code. So he's not going to go straight to Code and attack him. So is he just trying to escape? And obviously, again, to where? Where is he actually going to go to escape? That's what kind of becomes a bit of a weird situation, is that this is where you almost need Kawaki to get more allies. And so if Amado, who might be able to bring, like, Delta over to their side as well, plus Ada and Daemon come over to his side, then all of a sudden there's a way to get him out of this situation in a kind of reasonable way. But there's a lot of moving parts to make that happen. Then we get into the Code situation of like, if Code is involved, he does offer Kawaki sort of like the immediate chance to escape because of the claw marks, because we assume Kawaki's weakened enough that he can't use space-time ninjutsu. But the two of them hate each other. They basically both want to kill each other. Code, because Kawaki was, of course, the favored vessel and all of this stuff. And now that the deal with Ada is off, he wouldn't want nothing more than to kill him. But, on the other hand, Kawaki does want to interact with Code because he wants to take out a potential future Otsutsuki, like Code is planning to do. And Code needs a sacrifice for the Ten Tails, and the only options are Kawaki or Boruto. And it seems like the probably more likely one to get at this point is perhaps Kawaki. But we know neither of them get sacrificed to the Ten Tails, at least at this stage in the story, again because of the flash forward scene, where Boruto and Kawaki do confront each other in the future. So, does any of the Divine Tree stuff actually happen like now, before we go into the time skip? Or is it all going to be post time skip where we really deal with the issue with the Ten Tails and so on? Because I think Momoshiki wants to take that over. I think part of Momoshiki's plans is that he wants to, he wants to do what the Otsutsuki's want to do. And he wants that Divine Tree for himself. Because I'm thinking Momoshiki's plan is potentially, if I can eat the fruit of the Divine Tree as Momoshiki controlling Boruto, I will be powerful enough to like take over, and I'll be back basically at that point. I think that's what they're kind of implying that the Divine Tree can really do. That if it can turn Code into an Otsutsuki, I think it can for sure be enough to kind of change the nature of Boruto / Momoshiki as a being to make it more Momoshiki in control. And I think that's potentially what he's thinking the plan is going to be. And that to make this happen, he has to keep Kawaki in play as the kind of, all over the place kind of entity. Because Kawaki at full power would be able to stand against Code. It'll be an interesting fight now that they're more even. And he might be thinking like, and during them fighting, that's when I'll get my chance to, do something with the Divine Tree. But the issue there is that he can't do it himself. He can't sacrifice Boruto because he's in there and he doesn't want to be that part of the sacrifice. So it has to be Kawaki, but we know that doesn't happen. I suppose the question in this case is like, so Code is not a sacrifice candidate himself, but what if he does potentially get fed to the Divine Tree? What if that's the death of Code? Does anything happen there? There's still like a karma mark. It's the kind of not fully functional one that's just the power, but it's still Otsutsuki power. So do you get like a minor chakra fruit there? There's a way to do something there, I think. Because again, they haven't really addressed too much of the, Code has the powers, but like it's a failed experiment, and it's kind of like, so it's very convenient that it works that way, where he's not Otsutsuki, but he has the powers and all this sort of stuff. But, we'll see how that goes. So the Code stuff is very interesting. Then we come to Boruto, because interestingly, we haven't really mentioned him much here. So he's just regained his senses in terms of, Momoshiki for now, gone. But he is injured. He has suffered this damage. He's lost an eye, apparently. Will we get clarification on the status of his eye in terms of, like... My question, of course, is, when you say someone has lost an eye, I'm assuming his eye has been so badly damaged that basically it's gone. Like, there should be nothing there in the socket, basically. That, like, you would have to sort of get rid of the rest of it because it's so badly damaged just to be safe in terms of a surgery point of view. I think any of the crazy jutsus that could full on restore organs are not really in play. as far as I'm aware. So the only thing that could possibly explain something being kind of fixed with his eye is when Momoshiki takes over and the Byakugan stuff happens. Does that like kind of heal the eye? So he has the eye back but has the scar from previously losing the eye. That's what's going to be interesting to me. It's just like, is Boruto blind in one eye except when he uses his powers and then it opens up? Is that what we're doing? Or I'm not really sure. There was a little confusion I had about that because I don't think the art was as clear as needed to be. And then we get into the weird sense of like, oh yeah, when the powers activate he gets an eye, but then he goes back to not having an eye. That's a bit odd to me. So no, I get it. Like, in terms of there's all this body modification stuff of like when the Borushiki stuff happens, he gains a horn and the horn can go away. So I guess you can accept the same logic for like his eye kind of coming and going. But especially with the whole Jogan stuff still somewhere in the middle of all of this, creating a messy situation, it's a bit confusing. So the big question is obviously going to be, will he go with the group to find Kawaki? And are we building up to another sort of like final Boruto Kawaki fight? Is this going to be our Naruto Sasuke from the end of Naruto Part 1 fight? That is what kind of leads us into the kind of like time skip, the need for these characters to go their separate ways and train up ahead of their next encounter. Or is the fight that we kind of had in like basically like the last chapter, is that kind of it for now? And we're going to just have Kawaki dealing with a lot of other characters, the likes of Sasuke, Mitsuki, Shigadai, and potentially even more other characters. And it's just, this is how Boruto sort of loses people, is they get taken out by Kawaki in some way, injured, killed. You know, what's going to happen? Because the big question is obviously, how will Boruto's eyes take everything from him? Now, obviously, you don't take that super literally, perhaps, in that, like, do I think a big energy blast is going to come out of his eye and just kill everyone around him? No, that's a bit blunt. But the idea seems to be that, you know, Boruto in some way will be responsible for why he has quote-unquote lost everything, lost all the people around him. So now Kawaki has sent away Naruto and Hinata. So they've been sent away. This isn't really Boruto's fault, it's Kawaki's fault. Now, is the logic here that, well, Kawaki only did this because Boruto's Otsutsuki, so effectively Boruto's kind of power, his eyes or whatever, are the reason that they had to go away? But then take everything from him would have to include like Himawari. So does that mean something's happening to her? But that doesn't seem to fit in with the presentation we've had of her in recent chapters. It really all depends on like what we're eventually kind of trying to do, where we're positioning characters for the time skip. Are we losing characters in this arc? Because this really does suggest that something is going to happen to basically most of the main cast. And you would assume for Boruto that would be, okay, both of his parents, it would be Himawari. You assume that would include Sarada and Mitsuki as well. And I suppose that would make probably the most sense, but are they including like Shikadai and Inojin and Chocho in that as well? And what's going to happen there? Is it just that like everyone gets trapped in this, you know, Kawaki dimension? Is that just how he's going to go about like dealing with people, and they're just kind of quote unquote sent away? Is that's an interesting point? Or does somehow what happened here, does Boruto do that to other people? I don't really know. Like there is a confusing aspect to this, because apparently Boruto is the one who is responsible for this. This is what, there has to be some sort of, I think, clever reveal with this, because I think we're all expecting something at least clever when the truth about this actually comes out. Because otherwise, like, if it is some vague thing where just like, oh, Boruto, your actions have prompted me to do this thing, that's not a great explanation. Is it just saying that like, oh, me as Momoshiki, I will take control of your body, but to everyone else it will look like you're the one doing it. So in me taking everything, it will be you taking everything from yourself. I'm not sure if that's what we want either. So what's going on? What is the issue in all of this? And obviously we all fear for Sasuke. I think so many people are predicting Sasuke to die just because we had the setup for like he wasn't there for Boruto during the last incident, which is basically what we're doing next week in the anime, or I suppose later this week in the anime. But so he wants to be there this time. Now he was in the last chapter, so we assume he's going to be involved in all of this. But are we building up to something huge happening to Sasuke? Because that's the other characters that, like, yeah, this is his mentor, this is his sensei. This would be a huge thing if something were to happen to Sasuke. But then there's also the thing of, like, if Mitsuki's going to confront him going all out, Kawaki may be forced to kill Mitsuki. So what's going to happen here? We're expecting some shocking stuff at the very least. Then the Himawari stuff, of course, you know, Daemon taking an interest in her for either very early, maybe romantic reasons, or because he senses some sort of innate power in her. What does that mean? How is that going to work? We obviously got a little bit with Himawari from the last chapter, her returning home to find her parents gone. So we assume off screen she's going to be told about what happened. And I suppose she's going to immediately want to go to her brother. But then, what is the plan for the character overall? What are we actually doing in all of this with her? Because I think the assumption has to be with her that the time skip will be exceptionally important for this character to kind of morph her into, I think, the character we want her to become, where she is more involved in the action. And now that like something really tragic here has sort of happened, she, I think, is going to be in a way put down a path where this is kind of her only option, is I think to probably develop her skills, become a ninja so she can fight too, to help her brother. And in a way, help with the conflict between her, quote unquote, two brothers. And that is an interesting point as well. And her to help somehow get her parents back. I'd like to see her involved in the story as well. And it not just forever be Kawaki and Boruto are basically the only real characters in the manga. But who knows what we're going to do. And then it's just the general stuff. Broader time skip. Is the village going to be destroyed in the next couple of chapters? Like, is Code going to come in here, destroy the village, and this is the setup for, like, everyone needs to go away, retreat, train, we come back post-time skip, and whenever we return to the village, that will be where we have the big confrontation. Because we still have to get to the whole, you know, what they're talking about in that opening chapter is sort of Kawaki being like, you know, the age of the shinobi is over, and Boruto being like, no, I am still a shinobi. Now, we've seen that a little bit, in that when Kawaki went to kill Sarada, he noted that, you know, shinobi are always the first to die. But it feels like we need a little bit more time for him to maybe develop the severe, like, hatred of shinobi specifically. So, I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts. I think, as ever, it's always difficult to predict what happens here, because inevitably with this manga, if you predict big stuff to happen, it's always maybe a little bit lesser than what you think is going to happen. Like, for instance, the speculation, I think, ahead of 78, we expected huge things, and we just sort of got the basic stuff we expected. Whereas I think the previous chapter, it was kind of like, not really expecting much, but that was the chapter they, like, initiated, like, the end game. So that was a real surprising chapter. So what way will they go here? I think beyond just the characters going to seek out Kawaki, that's the big thing. The village will pursue Kawaki. That kind of feels like the big thing that needs to happen, just because of everything that's overall gone down with Naruto and Hinata being taken away. It means there's a lot of chaos just everywhere. So Shikamaru is, I suppose, the acting leader of the village. So how much control is he quickly going to be able to establish? And I think that's just going to prompt all the characters to just leave on their own. I don't even know how big of an organized attempt this is all going to be to go out. And then, of course, I think the big thing will probably be the setup with the likes of... Wait, where do I have it? I think it's more up here, isn't it? Yeah. Amado. Yeah, these three. The setup with these characters, I think, is maybe more of what we have to do. Ada, notably, wasn't really a focus in the last chapter. Amado only had the quick one scene, but these are going to be essential going forward. So I'm hoping for some stuff from them at the very least as well. But yeah, that's pretty much been it. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on what we will get in Boruto Chapter 79 in just 1 week? What do you think the big things going to happen are? It's a volume ending chapter, so do you think it will be big? I really want to know. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.